All right, Eric, it's good to be with you here. How are you doing today?
Good, very good. Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Well, it was nice to chit chat with you last week on your podcast as well. And I know that you guys you and your father at Privacy Academy do some really interesting stuff that I think a lot of people would really appreciate if they knew more about why privacy is so important. And I thought a great way to start is with kind of two questions that you can just mix in. And it's essentially, what exactly do you guys do at the Privacy Academy, and how did you get started in this particular field?
Yeah, for sure. So at Privacy Academy, we teach the average person how they can get private and secure. We found that there's a gap basically because everyone who's talking about online privacy, it was kind of tech geeks talking to other tech geeks, and they didn't have this core understanding of why privacy really mattered. It was just something they're interested in. And so Glenn, my father, the founder of Privacy Academy, wanted to create something where he could distill the information down to the average person so they could take actionable steps to get private and secure themselves. And the reason that we did it is because of freedom, basically. I mean, if you look, I think it's over 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, Edward Snowden revealed that the NSA was spying on its civilians.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's only gotten much worse. Big tech is teaming up with Big Brother to gather as much information as possible on everyone. And it's not just to sell you personalized ads. It's very insidious. It goes down, you can go down a ton of rabbit holes to see why privacy is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. As you mentioned the Edward Snowden piece, I actually had this memory of being on a bus coming back with our team, Collective Evolution. We had gone on a company trip, and we were on a bus from the resort in Cuba coming back to the airport. And we kind of opened up our phones for the first time in the 7 days we were gone. And we saw the Snowden story had become like this big thing. And it was like, oh my gosh, like, what is this? What the heck's going on? And yeah, it was an interesting memory there because that was the beginning of a lot of people really starting to think about privacy and really starting to think about what is exactly happening with our data. And with
Yeah.
that said, I mean, why don't you touch on at least some of the reasons, whatever comes to mind here, as to why privacy is important to the average person, and maybe even say like online privacy, why is that important?
Yeah. Well, if we look at online privacy, we're living in a world that's completely new. I mean, it's only been around for 20 years where the internet has greatly changed everyone's lives to the point
Hmm.
where most of us work online. Well, not most, a large amount of people work online. A lot of people date online. A lot of people have friendships online. They stream movies online. The whole world has become very digital. And we haven't really figured out the checks and balances for this new world. And I think that's clear because most people don't understand the importance of privacy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different reasons why it's so important. A great area to look towards is the Chinese social credit system because that's basically a complete surveillance grid.
Yeah.
So let's say you have the camera on your phone; it's always watching you, and let's say you decide to watch a podcast like what we're doing right here. Then, since it's going against the state agenda, maybe you'll lose some points, or maybe you're spending too much money on entertainment and you get docked for that. They'll control every aspect of your life. So if you live if you live in a world where you're constantly surveilled by cameras in your home, everywhere you go, you'll be constantly punished for anything that the state deems is bad because it's not good or bad. It's whatever the state deems is good or bad.
Right.
So yeah, another example of that is if you get low enough score, in China, they limit your travel on planes, trains. They limit like the loans you can take, what schools you can go to, what jobs you can get. It goes all the way down to you getting blacklisted. You can get on house arrest. And if people contact or associate with you, then they will lose points just for associating with you. So you become socially isolated as well. So, for example, with everything I do, I would definitely be instantly blacklisted. And let's say I've got a best friend, then they would message me. And then before the message would send, it would say, "Are you sure you want to complete this message? This person is blacklisted. You'll lose 10 points. Do you want to continue?" And so,
Hmm.
yeah, it's
Wow.
isolation geographically, it's isolation financially, it's isolation socially. And that's the system that they're putting in place right now. It's not just about, creeps trying to watch you in your home. It's about power, basically.
Yeah.
Information is power. I'm sure you've heard that before. It's true.
Yeah, 100%. So this leads to the question, because oftentimes people will say, hey, China is a different story. They're a communist party, this, that, whatever, all that. It's dictatorship, and it might ultimately end up for a lot of people saying that would never happen here, wherever that is, whether they're in Canada, the U.S., the U.K., whatever. But there is evidence that the framework, the foundation of what China has, is being built across the Western world. When you said that it would be a little bit more clandestine, it would be a little bit more under wraps here because of the way people value freedom, does that mean to you that people won't really know? Like, I guess this is a different way of framing the question. Is there going to come a point where you think Western countries like Canada, US, these sorts of things, come out and say, here is your social credit score. You're now signed up to it. You need to download the app or whatever it might be, and you can track it. Are they just going to come out and say that at some point?
I think they go through really slow violations over time. They've been slowly pushing and pushing and pushing. It's happened in different areas. So first of all, like I said earlier, Western people have strong ideals about freedom.
Yeah.
And they've been attacking that through social media. That's why we've seen the radicalization of the woke left. That's why we're seeing people rise up with the woke right, like I was talking before. So there's definitely a major brainwashing component to it. And, if you look at even like strong Republican-leaning people, the woke right, they want to implement things like digital IDs to prevent children from watching porn or going on social media, which is a good cause. But then the implication of that is that a digital ID would start.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you look at J. Edward Griffin's book about the Federal Reserve, the Creature of Jekyll Island, he talks about how when they first created the Federal Reserve, they didn't care about what it was to start with. All they want to do is get it in the door, and then they can slowly twist it into this awful amalgamation that it is today. So
Yeah.
they'll justify any means to the end, and then they're going to change it to what they want it to be. So slowly, it could be carbon scores with your flights. It could be, how much red meat you're consuming. It could be if you're posting hateful content, whatever they deem it to be. They're going to slowly do it, and they're radicalizing people at the same time to twist them to think it's justified to take that away.
Yeah. Yeah. And for folks that are listening and going, oh, well, they'd never do that, or they'd never do this, and whatever it might be. Look at all the things that have happened that we all thought probably would never or could never happen, and the directions they had gone. I think about censorship. I think about what happened with COVID, these sorts of things where it's like, I don't think anybody could have thought that they would have said, okay, we're going to put everybody into their, to their homes and lock them down and so on and so forth. And yet here it is. And there's always this, like, people will say the sky is falling and, blah, 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 and there's panic. But I do think with this particular issue, we have seen a lot already in terms of how we are basically being turned into people that could be manipulated with information, with our choices, with our decisions so easily.
Freedom of speech and thought is heavily under attack by big tech censorship right now. Mm-hmm. They're going after as many people as they can. And so if we remove freedom of speech, people won't be able to have thoughts. They won't be able to have opportunities based off of what information they can gather. And yeah, that greatly relates to privacy as well. When you are in a surveillance state, everything is gathered about you. There's profiles being made on you. They know where you are, who you talk to, what you text, what your hot buttons are. And there's basically a profile that's made on you that can know all of your hot buttons and how to manipulate you. I know there was a great article by Gene Epstein, and he was talking about how Google can manipulate swing voters one way or another on election fraud. And so that's a great example of how once it has this profile of data on you, it can decide how it can slowly manipulate your beliefs. And I like to think of the internet as a library, basically. Mm-hmm. It's this giant collection of knowledge. And your search engine is basically the librarian that gets to decide what information you receive and what order you receive it. Yeah. And so let's say Google is teamed up with Big Brother, the government. They can skew the results to show, for example, one candidate over another, and then greatly change how you think about certain things. So there's definitely a massive brainwashing campaign that's going on.
Yeah. I remember this with Google and their search results. I think it was the 2016 election, and there was a lot of stuff coming up about Hillary's kind of the way she was using her own servers for emails and all these different things. And WikiLeaks was pretty big in exposing a lot of this stuff. And Google would literally change the recommendations in the search bar such that like when you were typing stuff, like it wouldn't recommend bad things about Hillary, and it would kind of lower the rank of bad things about Hillary. And yet, as soon as you typed in like Donald Trump, it would say like, is a bad person, is a criminal, is a this, is a that, right?
Yep.
And we think, you mentioned swing voters, and that's an important thing because that probably makes up a larger amount of people than people realize. It's probably like 65% of the electorate, if not, maybe even a touch more. And I think, if I remember correctly, does the stat something like tens of millions of votes is what they thought Google's changes could have affected in that election? Does that sound right?
It sounds right. I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah. And I think another key point too is a swing voter is someone that is not completely sure about something. And that's what they've determined is that when people are on the fence about anything, they're more likely to be susceptible. And if you
Yeah.
look at social media, the way that it can manipulate you down this rabbit hole of news that it shares with you, it can make you someone who is radical in one way and slowly break you down and make you radical in another way. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, so you would say that in a sense. I mean, it's possible that social media is putting people in alternative views and echo chambers as much as they're putting people with mainstream views in echo chambers.
Yeah, I think there's the potential that the internet can be a wonderful tool if it remains free and private, but
Yeah.
if it's not, it is a very powerful surveillance tool and brainwashing tool.
Yeah. And so from a privacy point of view, what these outlets, or I should say big tech companies, are able to do is sort of collect all of the data of your usage and these sorts of things and sort of, then show you content that's really in the realm of what your hot buttons are. Now, you did mention, I think you said sort of like trigger points too for people. Like people have trigger points and they know how to like push those. So
Yep.
are they always trying to give you what they think you want in a way that just pushes you down an echo chamber? Or is there also just kind of giving whatever might even be nefarious that you may not want, but they're going to convince you want?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's an article by Forbes, and I think it's called Facebook Manipulated 689,003 Users Without Their Consent. I really recommend everyone reads that. It's a shocking read. It's 12 years ago that it happened, and they talk about how they took the 689,003 people without them knowing about it, and they put them in two different groups. One group that would only see really cute things like babies and kittens and stuff, and then they would analyze how they reacted to it and how they continued on the platform. And then they also showed the other group photos of like gore, dead dogs, awful things, and then they analyzed that. And what they determined was that when they show them negative things, they'll be more likely to continue using social media, to continue posting on it, and that they're easier to manipulate down a rabbit hole, basically. And so that was a test that they did 12 years ago, but it's a great little sneak peek at how social media machines work. They're trying to constantly poke you into addiction, basically, that will lead you down this rabbit hole where you're weak, it's personalized for you, and then they can radicalize you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it seems as though, especially with the addition of TikTok too, I feel like so much of it is just hijacking people's, minds, hijacking the way that they emotionally feel, their attention. I hear people will say all the time, I opened my phone, I went to one of these apps, and then 30 minutes went by, and I was like, wait, how the heck did I just watch like, I don't know, something like 100 reels in a row?
Yep.
And they didn't even realize it. So there's an essence to this of also manipulating the mind. And what would you say, like, this is something that, I mean, somebody can't necessarily get around that part when it comes to social media without being just aware of it, correct?
Yeah, being aware. Personally, I've exited most social medias because I don't think that they're good for my health and for my mind. So yeah, I mean, it depends on how far you want to go with it. And having awareness is good. Maybe setting limits for yourself and exiting social media is great.
Yeah. So there's no like tools that one could use to like change what they see on any of these platforms.
It depends. I mean, like if you want to watch YouTube in a private environment, there's different tools for that, like NVIDIA's new pipe, so you can watch it. It won't track you.
Mm.
In terms of like your own personal discipline of not getting lost in those spirals, I think that's more a personal
Yeah.
battle where you have to kind of figure out how you can limit yourself. But when it comes to something like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, not really. I mean, I think that is all just very bad. I actually have a personal story too about
Yeah.
when I was about 20, I went through some hard times. I was a chef. I wasn't involved in my father's business, and I wasn't actually talking to them that much either, but a decent amount. And so I there's one day at work where I was very anxious and I was very depressed, very low that day, and I kept listening to this song called "Rotten Apple" by Alice in Chains over and over. And then I got home, I put on TikTok, and I scrolled for a bit until I saw this meme where it was like a depressed, just a depressed person in a chef outfit, and it said, "When you're a line cook, and you, when you're a line cook, and what was it? When you're a line cook, you listen to Rotten Apple 24 hours a day, and you want to kill yourself." That's what it was. When you're a line
Wow.
cook, you listen to Rotten Apple 24 hours a day, and you want to kill yourself. That's what it said. And it shocked me when I saw that. And I knew a little bit that algorithms existed, but I didn't know like to what level they existed. So I immediately closed the app. I uninstalled, and that was the last moment I was on TikTok. And it kind of pushed me towards privacy in the first place. And what I think that was so if you think about your phone, like I said earlier, it knows everywhere you go. So it could see that I would go to culinary school, and I also went to my restaurant every single day. It could see my photos. It could see my texts. It was connected to Spotify, so it could tell that I was listening to that song over and over. And if you look at how powerful AI is, I don't think it's far-fetched to say that even 5 years ago, AI could have created a simple meme like that
Yeah.
specifically for someone to show them on their feed to try to push them over the edge. So, yeah, I mean, it made a mistake by pushing me too far, and I realized what it was doing, but really terrifying to see.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of times when we see technology, to your point, and I mean, first off, I mean, your story is that's pretty intense to sort of have that just so blatant, right? Like
Yeah,
it goes beyond the point of coincidence. At least for me, when I hear it, it feels more
same.
synchronistic in the sense that there's something else behind it. Um, and so, but yeah, I think when we see a lot of technologies that emerge, AI and these sorts of things, we forget that these black budget programs, these massive corporations who have billions of dollars in revenue, have really been developing stuff for such a long time. And then we, as a society, we sort of see things and we think it's new, but really it's not that new, right? And
Yep.
and so yeah, I think absolutely that potential could have been there. Um, Sort of two directions that I want to go here, and I want to put a pin in one of them. So I'm just trying to make a decision on the spot, but let's go with the Peter Thiel thing for a second, because I think this is worth mentioning, and this goes back to X, and it's this question. Obviously, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are very close. Peter Thiel, for those who don't know, I mean, he's this big, huge tech entrepreneur. He has a company that he created. It's an analytics and you could say surveillance company. He's working with the CIA on this as well. And it's called Palantir. I can't remember how to pronounce it. But this is already being deployed with Israel right now when they're trying to profile people that they're attacking on the Palestinian side. And with Thiel being so close to X and with Thiel being so close to the Trump-Vance presidency, what do we make of that in terms of here's this surveillance tool? Will it be deployed potentially in some of the Western countries if it isn't already?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. What we're heading towards is basically the West is heading towards a social credit-like system like what we're seeing in China. But I think they're going to do it in very elusive ways because in the West, we value individual freedom.
Yeah.
So if you look at flights, there's the carbon score on them. I think eventually they'll try to limit people through things like carbon scores. You're going to have your CBDCs where you can be financially punished. We've seen this in Canada with the Canadian trucker convoy. In the UK, people are being locked up just for tweets. retweeting things that go against, that share about the riots that happened. So yeah, I definitely think that's going on. And I guess it goes back to also what you're saying earlier about if I trust X. It's a hard question to answer, honestly. But I mean, I'm skeptical in some ways. Like, I know he appointed Linda Yaccarino, I think is her name, from the World Economic Forum. I know she's part of that, and she's the CEO. So there's definitely a lot of suspicious stuff about it, but also just based off what I'm seeing stuff on X that's not permitted on other platforms. But that also goes back to what you're saying too, where it's like, you know, you could have the radicalized mainstream media, you could have, and then radicalized social media that show two different things, trying to separate people two different ways.
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to having a conscious skepticism constantly.
Yeah. Yeah, I too am skeptical of X. Do I use all of these platforms currently? Yeah, very, very sparingly. I probably spend 5 minutes or less on social media a day, to be honest.
Yeah.
There was a time where I did use it more, probably about 10 years ago, but that was when it was a big part of our business. And, ever since sort of the censorship era, we haven't really, gained much from it. So there's less time spent. However, the Elon Musk, and again, when I see, because I know people are very bullish on the Trump-Vance situation and are very bullish on kind of the direction things are going. And this, I'm speaking more on the people that are, let's say, more awake to things, they question reality a bit more. But I think people are kind of maybe missing out on the degree to which things can be controlled with Trump-Vance, with Peter Thiel, with Elon, all of it there. To me, I would say, people need to be able to recognize when it has gone sideways, if it does. And that to me is a big one. And for people to look out for when they're in a position where they don't trust. And so you remember that famous clip of Mark Zuckerberg being with Congress there, and he's being questioned about Facebook, and they ask him hey, I get these advertisements of things I've only talked about. I've never searched before. I've never even done anything. I just hear about something. I talk about it with a friend, and then next thing you know, I had an advertisement. And Zuckerberg said, not to my knowledge. So I have two questions. One, did he really not know, in your opinion? And two, do you think Facebook has been using that technology of listening in probably for as many as 10 years?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, like that article I brought up earlier, that was 12 years ago when they did that study. So there's also another study where it's called Facebook Targets Insecure and Worthless Teens for Advertisers. I mean, it's evil. And there's no way that Mark Zuckerberg doesn't know what's going on. I think that's totally incorrect. I mean, that's not true. It's definitely, he knows what's going on. He doesn't even let his own kids use Facebook. So I think, I think he's very corrupt. And then I also want to add quickly to the last thing we talked about with the webcam surveillance. The same goes through for your microphones. So if you go to mic-lock.com, they have great anti-surveillance tools there. They've got good webcam covers, and they also have microphone blockers. So just a tip.
Nice. And so it sounds like, we have our usage of the internet, which includes our search history and our what we watch and all this kind of stuff. We have the laptops themselves and the phones themselves. Can you talk about kind of how within the technology itself, there is essentially this opportunity for, I guess, spying? Is the technology a big piece to it as well, or is it just the actual apps and systems we use?
Yeah, I think it goes multiple ways. There's such a thing as called a hardware backdoor. So, for example, there's a famous, event that happened where they released the Google Nest. And then I think it was after 2 years of releasing it, they just tweeted out, Google Nest now works with voice controls. And everyone was like, wait, what do you mean voice controls? You never told us there was a microphone in here. And they're like, oops, sorry, we forgot to tell you. We forgot to put it on the blueprint, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that's an example of a hardware backdoor where there's a microphone that works without you even knowing it's there. That can happen, yeah. So recently, Glenn and I have been working with Linux companies to provide like private computers that are easy to use for people. And there's companies that build them themselves by scratch. Purism is one, Star Labs. So they know everything that goes into it. There's also a software called Coreboot that also integrates with the software to the hardware, so it kind of prevents that. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so these devices would essentially be almost pure in a sense of there wouldn't be any backdoors, any opportunities to get in. Is that now regardless of what software you put on it, or the software also matters?
Software definitely matters. Yep. I mean, if you look at a great example is I think Grammarly, because it constantly analyzes your screen for everything you write. So let's say you want a private app, you use Signal to message people or Session. Let's say you have it on your computer and then you've got Grammarly open, and then it's constantly reading everything that's on the app. And
Right.
one of the reasons we've been promoting or working with Linux computers is because of Copilot and Apple Intelligence. It takes a screenshot of your screen every second to analyze everything on it. So I think it's really important to start moving away from Windows and Apple right now.
Yeah, so explain that further. Are you saying Copilot? I'm not familiar with that. Is that a Windows thing?
Hmm.
And
Yeah, it's a
then,
new update. And then Apple Intelligence is basically the Apple AI. They're AI assistants that are going to be on your computer. They constantly take screenshots of everything. They have features like recall where you can say, there's a video about it where they talk about, she says, brown leather bag. And then it goes through all her photos. It goes through all her documents. And it basically finds everything with a brown leather bag for her. I know Apple has stuff like, what am I doing on Thursday? And then it reads through your text and it says, oh, you're meeting with Julie at 12 p.m. for a picnic, stuff like that.
right. So it's like these, it's passed off in this meaningful way where it's like, yeah, this is a useful tool. This is great. And I think people can resonate with that. Like there are times where I'm like, no doubt, I'm like, man, these would be great tools to have. I mean, I have to build myself these really intricate like note taking and web taking systems on my computer such
Yeah.
that I'm able to navigate all of the research I do, all of the learning that I do, and all these different fields that I'm involved in. And sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I could just say like, hey, computer, like, can you just tell me like where this piece is? So I can see how useful this is, but at the same time, there's the downside. And this leads to, sort of one of the big questions, which is people will often say, hey, I got nothing to hide. There's, what does it matter whether they're surveilling me anyway? And how would you respond to that?
I'd say that you fundamentally don't understand what privacy means. I mean, if you look at our founding fathers when they made the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment is the right to privacy. And I'm often amazed that they had the foresight to understand the importance of privacy back then before we lived in a technological age. But earlier, I kind of butchered what I was talking about when I was talking about freedom of speech and how it relates to privacy. But if freedom of speech is taken away, then you will get punished for anything you say. And so if we have a digital ID, you can't anonymously share anything to help people see through propaganda, see through censorship, and you'll be punished for it forever. So that's one of the ways that they're trying to crack down on it, is through digital IDs. They want to censor, they want to suppress, and they want to punish anyone with opposing viewpoints.
Yeah. Now, from your perspective, when you say they, what does that mean to you?
Um, well, you could point it towards the World Economic Forum. There's a lot of different globalists or elite. I don't know. I don't really have a head of the snake, but there's definitely a regime of elite rulers around the world that are trying to set up this technical grid of basically slavery. I mean, if you're in a CBDC, financial slavery. If you are in a social credit system, that's just total slavery. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like the more I've researched this over the last 15 years, it's like there's these pockets and groups of people. And I know we chatted about this a little bit, but there's all these pockets and groups of powerful people that seem to they all see the benefit in certain things. And having a level of surveillance and being able to profile your people is, definitely one of those major ways is you kind of know what everybody's doing and what's going on. And, you can use it for good, and you could say, hey, we can find criminals and we can find this. And I'm sure that's going to happen. But at the same time, there's all the other parts to it. So I guess out of curiosity here, like, is what you're talking about, is it an inevitability that we're going to end up there? Or is there something that we can ultimately like do to stop this as people?
Oh yeah, I'm very hopeful about this, and it's basically just a checks and balance for the digital world to have privacy, transparency, and open source software, and of remaining anonymous online. I think with enough people, it can definitely happen. And even if things go well, I'm not doing this because I want it to go wrong. I hope it goes well because privacy is needed in good times or bad. It's like a checks and balance. A good example of it is in America, we have the Second Amendment of the Constitution that's often misunderstood, where people say it's about defending yourself from like an intruder in your home. And it's true. I mean, having a gun at your home can help prevent if someone's trying to, go in and kill you. But one of the main reasons that they created it is so you could protect yourself from an out of control government.
Yeah.
And so, if you look at the people who are very strong Second Amendment believers in America, let's say like a very Republican person, they're going to be excited that Trump's in office. It's not like they're going to go return their guns. So that's how we need to think about privacy. So even if someone is respecting our privacy on a digital level, it's something that we should never lose in good times or bad, because it's just got to be a fundamental check and balance for this new technological world, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. It sets, the more we normalize it, it seems to set a framework for so many ugly things to become possible. And do you see a world where, because like, again, we go back to some of these tools, right? I mean, they're tools to some extent that you would see in maybe like Star Trek or something like that, where it's like, computer, can you, blah, 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 do this for me? And it kind of just will spit something out. And there is an element of AI and these sorts of things that I certainly feel are part of humanity's future. And I wonder, do you agree with that? Like that it would be a good thing to have some of these technologies?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a direction that humans are going. I don't know how I feel personally about it, because I think me personally, I like, traditional, I like nature, but I also understand the direction it's going, and I don't think it's necessarily bad. And I think, being in this community, I've seen, like, I have a privacy phone, and I like it better than back, 5 years ago when I had an iPhone, and I have a privacy laptop. I like it better. And there's privacy-oriented AI, so it goes back to what I was saying, where we can still advance technologically. It's not like, big tech solutions are the only solution.
Yeah. So this goes back to how we decide to steward, these items, whether they're the phones, the laptops, the AIs. If they're stewarded with care and with, love, I would even say, and just like a level of consciousness where, we're not trying to domineer. We're not trying to surveil everything. We're not trying to sell. We're not trying to do all these different things. Then we could have these things. Do you think that, well, I guess one question would be like, do you see that it's possible in our world, even economically right now, where enough people care about privacy that companies that do create these phones and these laptops, can they survive easily? Or are they seeing growth, or is it something that still everybody's just going to the Apples, they're going to the Googles? Like, what are you seeing in that regard?
Yeah, I'm seeing definitely huge growth right now. Everyone is very excited. The issue of privacy is actually just people don't understand what's going on. But as soon as they get aware of it, they get very passionate about it, which also gives me hope. But I've seen countless people switch to private computers, private phones, because they understand what's at stake. And so it's great to see, because it's not if I'm the only person that has one, I'm not going to do anything. But if everyone gets one, then the surveillance state can end. Yeah.
And with affordability in all that stuff, how does it compare?
Same price, maybe cheaper a little bit. It's not that expensive. In Linux and Graphene, like, one of the things that I really did not like about Apple is they release updates over and over, and they intentionally slow down their older models just to get you to buy a newer model.
Yeah.
Graphene OS is a phone, a private de-Googled version of an Android phone, basically. They don't sell any phones. It's just the software. They have no incentive to ever slow your phone down, because, they don't make the hardware of it. And then same with Linux. It holds up very well for a long time. It's affordable, probably more affordable than most other things.
So like, I used to root my phone. I've been an Android guy for a long time, and I used to root my phone and then use, kind of more of a custom version of Android where Google would basically be stripped out of it. Is that essentially what this is? Or do you think those custom versions still had, some spyware capability, let's say, whereas this graphene is different?
It just depends on the model. And I think it depends on the operating system that you stripped it to. And I think a big key of that is that it's open source, because if it's closed source, no one can go in and do their due diligence and check if the company's telling the truth with it. And then when it comes to hardware backdoors, like I was talking about earlier, there's some companies. I know Nitro Keys does hardware inspections of, like this. This is a graphene phone. It's based off of a Google Pixel, funny enough, but Google is open sourced, so you're allowed to go in and change it, remove all the nasty parts of Google, and then Nitro Keys goes in. If you would go with them to get a graphene phone, they disable the camera if you want. They disable the microphone if you want. There's a lot of different companies doing a lot of cool stuff like that.
Nice. Yeah, so it sounds like, I mean, it's moving in a direction that people are caring more about this stuff, and that ultimately there are options out there. So if you're not going to, let's say, buy a new laptop, buy a new phone, that kind of stuff, but people are listening to this and they want to just start somewhere with, like, what are some basic things that people can do to start being more private on the internet?
Yep. Yeah. So first of all, cover your cameras, block your mics. I already said miclock.com. That's great. You can also cover it with nail polish, like the webcam. If you do masking tape, do at least 2 to 3 layers, because masking tape is kind of see-through. But everyone does that. I mean, the head of the CIA does that. Mark Zuckerberg does that. Everyone does it. So definitely do that, because if it's not the government spying on you, it could be a hacker, it could be a creep. Who knows what it is? That is definitely a really important step. Another great one is switching your browser. I recommend, like, Brave browser is great. Mulvad's great. And then also changing your search engine as well. Brave is good. That's what I use most of the time. Use complex passwords and store it in an encrypted password manager. Get a VPN.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff. I mean, I could keep going on forever. I mean, you could switch to Signal Session. I mentioned those earlier. Get a private email address. There's a ton of stuff you can do.
Yeah. I got my stuff covered here on my camera, and I've been using Brave, I think now for like 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. And for people who are wondering, Brave, you can also get it on your phone. I use it on my phone as well, so you don't have to use like the stock stuff. You can see and feel the difference in terms of what it recommends. Like, you don't see the same sort of crap when you like are using Chrome all the time, and like you can tell that it knows exactly who you are. And I don't know, I haven't really found any conveniences other than every now and then I will go to a site where, I don't know, just something's not quite working properly on Brave, but it's very rare. For the most part, it works really well, and it's faster. That's another big thing. It's just like, it is faster than using other things. So there's some hope there.
Yep. No ads either.
Yeah, that's another good one. I mean, Brave. I mean, that used to be how our company made a lot of money. So if everybody used Brave, we'd be screwed. But no.
Yep.
But hey, and that's the other thing, right? Is it's like we're just in such a weird time where it's like all of these changes and all of these things that are happening, they do have blowback, right? Like, they do have blowback on certain people, certain things, certain industries, certain businesses, right? And so there is an element of like disruption, but at the same time, I think if this happens slowly, right, and like we're seeing people make different changes and they adopt stuff and they do things differently and all this kind of stuff, they do seem to change in a meaningful way that everybody kind of just kind of works out.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm just going to quickly look here at my thing. Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. So, going back to this concept of spyware, and it used to be that, I remember back in the day, it would be like you'd get like a bug, like you'd click something in an email or whatever, and it would be like a bug that's on your computer that's like spyware. But it feels like the apps these days themselves that everybody has is essentially just spyware. Is that essentially what's going on?
Oh yeah. Yep. Your applications can gather a ton of information about your phone. I gave that TikTok example earlier. That's a great example of how it goes through your text, it goes through Spotify, it goes through all this stuff. One of the things we say is just limit the amount of applications that you have on your phone to as little as possible, because a lot of them have software backdoors where they're looking into stuff. One of the ones that's most common for that actually is a flashlight application. So
really,
yeah, just use your phone flashlight. If you don't know that you have a flashlight on your phone, every phone has it. You don't need an app for it.
Wow. So yeah, you download a flashlight app, and the next thing you know, you're getting spyware.
Yep.
And so if I had a like one of these graphene OS phones, let's say, and I downloaded any sort of app from some app store, I'm assuming you can still do that or
Uh-huh. Yep. So there's F-Droid, which is very private, and then there's also the Aurora store, which is basically the Google Play Store, and you can visit it anonymously. You can set up settings to choose what allows Google Play services, if you want to do that at all or not. There's a lot of granular controls, so you can go into every application and say, what specifically the app gathers. You can also create separate users that have different applications on them that are basically sandboxed, so the apps
right.
are in one user won't interact with the other one.
Right. So essentially, like you would be able to use some of the apps you might know and love, but there would be significantly less spying going on in the background.
Yep. Yep.
Nice. Yeah.
The
That's
same thing goes too with computers. If you sandbox your browsers, if you have a specific browser that's specifically uh, like let's say you want to use Facebook, maybe you don't want to do that on the browser that you do all your other banking and everything else what you read for politics or whatever. Maybe you have a specific browser just for social media. There's recently been a like FISA rules that allows the government to spy on any software. So like Apple, Microsoft, it allows them to force the company to basically give over information to the government without a warrant or anything, and that's pretty insane.
Yeah. Yeah, that was even a question of like, is so much of the stuff that we see, whether it's, Facebook was collecting people's information through the microphone, or they were doing this, this sort of, study on people. Like, is any of this stuff illegal as it is in the laws today? And these companies have just been all getting away with it?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is it's kind of like what I was talking about with the social credit system, where they're being very elusive with it, and they're working on these public-private partnerships where something like Google is working basically as a government agency. And so it's a very interesting gray area, but they are going without warrant. Like I said, the FISA laws allows them to go to Google without a warrant, gather whatever information they want, and that is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. So yeah, I think it's completely illegal. Yeah, so one of the concerns that I have about AI is if I think about my great grandfather, he built his entire house from scratch. So he did the plumbing. I think he did the electricity. He just made his whole house by himself. And if you look at modern people nowadays, I couldn't do that. I know a lot of people are less specialized in that area. And as a society, we have such abundance that people hyper specialize into different areas, and they aren't really a jack of all trades like they used to be. And so my concern with AI is that people are going to start outsourcing so much stuff that they become the opposite of hyper specialized, where they just kind of are a complete dependent on technology.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the other day I saw this argument, like we're talking about Twitter. I saw it on X, on Twitter, and these people were arguing, and instead of giving like facts or logic behind what they were saying, the girl that replied was like, literally ask ChatGPT, it will tell you I'm right. And I was like, what?
Wow.
You're using AI to prove your point. I mean, you need to think for yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it is one thing to say, hey, we found these amazing ways of using each other, the community, let's say, so that some people build houses and other people do other things. And that's
Yep.
one thing. It's another thing when, like you're saying, we can't think, we can't learn, we can't express, we can't do all these important aspects of being human. And I think that is definitely something that is going downhill, is our ability to think, to learn, to critically think, but also even just to be able to actually listen to somebody, right? Like
Yep.
we want to just, somebody says something and it's like, well, how do I just defeat that? And with so much information at our fingertips, especially information that will just tell us exactly what something is, apparently, yeah, we seem to be going in that direction. So that's a good point.
Yeah, and I've seen an application too that gathers all messages from, like, let's say you have Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Signal, whatever. It gathers all your messaging apps and it puts them all into one app together, which is obviously a huge privacy concern. But then it has an AI that responds to people for you, which is
Wow.
crazy. And yeah, and I would never do that. That's like outsourcing your friendships and your relationships to a robot, which is
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you look at the dependence on AI, I think, is it the Tower of Babylon? Or I don't know. There's this one story I heard about a library that apparently burned down, and they said that it had 1,000 years of knowledge in it. And when I was younger, I was always like, how could a specific thing have 1,000 years? How could it put us back 1,000 years? And now I'm looking at AI and technology. If we become so dependent on it, and let's say there's a big EMP or technology is destroyed, we would be put back very far, because no one's
Yeah.
specialized like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. And I think it was Library of Alexandria.
Yeah,
Probably
that's
the
what it was.
Yeah,
Yep.
burned. Yeah, burned down. Oh man, and yeah, I just think these points about us not being able to communicate and us being so busy in life that we can't even maybe get back to our friends because now these apps are there. Or, we can't do all these things that we shouldn't lose some of these capacities. We shouldn't lose some of these things that really make us human in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
it just seems like to some extent the movie Idiocracy is coming to mind. Have you ever seen that one?
Mm-mm.
It's a good one. I think you should check it out at some point. It's with I believe Luke Wilson, and so it's one of the Wilson brothers there. And essentially the story is he's frozen in time, and I can't remember like what the reason was at the beginning of the movie, but like something goes wrong and he kind of gets stuck frozen for a really long time, and the world continues to advance and advance and advance, and essentially people who are intelligent decide not to really breed because they have all these reasons as to why they didn't. And it kind of is relatable and funny. And then there's all the people that were, let's say, not as bright, continue to breed. And then they go like thousands of years in advance. And he kind of wakes up out of this cryogenically frozen state and is entering the world. And it's just like unbelievable. And it's not that different from what we have today, but imagine it a little bit more extreme. And
Yep.
what we're talking about right now in losing our capacities through AI is exactly what you start to see in that movie. So that movie's kind of like this interesting wake up call of like, hey, if we're not careful, it could look like that. But yeah, you should definitely check that one out.
Yeah, we'll do. That sounds great.
Appreciate all the insight and thoughts that you had here. Is there any final words that you want to add with regards to how people think about their privacy and how people think about why this really matters to them at the end of the day?
Yeah. I think we're doing a webinar together, right?
Yep.
Yep. So first of all, let me say, I'd love for you guys to come and join us for the privacy webinar that we're doing. That's held by my father, and he's better at this than I am. So hopefully you can enjoy that a lot. That will be at privacyacademy.com/collective evolution. And it's about an hour long, filled with practical steps that you can take to get private right away. But yeah, I really think it's important. Like I said, we're in a technological world, and it's new. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's great, but we don't have the checks and balances there. So if we don't act quick, then the power seekers will act before us, as they're actively trying to do. And we have the internet, which is a great thing that could be taken away from us and used as an awful tool of tyranny. So, let's act quick while we have the chance to, because these big tech companies are not going to give us our privacy back. We have to take it back ourselves.
Yeah, well said. And yeah, we gotta become those active engagers who are going to be like, you know what, we're going to decide where this is going to go,
Yep.
because this technology can be amazing, but it's got to be reined in. But appreciate you coming on and doing this. Is there anywhere where you want to send people now to check out to learn more about what you guys do?
Yep, that'll be at, just for the webinar, privacyacademy.com/collective evolution.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thanks so much again, and looking forward to that webinar.
I appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
All right.